Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.college. In this video, we're going to go over some real fundamentals for Unity. I'm going to go from creating an empty project up to something that's a little bit playable and talk about all of the different areas and features of Unity while we're going through it. So here, I'm set up to create a new project. We just give it a project name and a folder. You can choose 3D or 2D. I'm going to leave it on 3D. It doesn't really matter which one you pick in this case, though. It looks like there are a couple new options too for preview stuff, but just stick with 3D and hit create project, and you're going to be presented with a new project window, which we should see pop up any second now. There we go. And since we're in 2018, we actually get a new scene that's saved off in a scenes folder. So if you look down here, this is the project view. This is like the folder or the solution view where you see all of the things that are actually in your game or your project. We've got a subfolder for scenes, and we have this scene called sample scene. If you look up here in the hierarchy, you can see that this says sample scene as well. This is actually the loaded scene right there. So if I create a new scene, so file new scene, you'll see now we're in an untitled scene. Maybe I create a couple more of these lights. I just hit Control D, Command D on a Mac to duplicate these, just to show that when I double click on the sample scene, it's going to ask me if I want to save changes. I hit don't save, and you see that we've loaded back into the sample scene. So we're just going to work in this sample scene for now, and I'm going to run you through how to build a very basic little game. So one thing I want to do first is in this scene view tab, this is where we edit our scene and where we place our game objects. I'm going to switch it over to a 2D view. We can toggle back and forth. This is actually a little button here. It's just going to make it easier for the type of game that I want to build here. Then I can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. I want to be able to zoom in a little bit and be able to see my camera here, because I'm going to create game objects that are going to show in front of the camera. So to do that, the next thing I want to do is go to this game object window or menu and choose 3D object, and we're just going to create a cube. When we do that, you'll see a new cube appeared in the hierarchy. The hierarchy is like a list view of everything that's in the scene. We also have this cube placed right here. If I hit the 2D button again, switch back to 3D mode, you'll see it's actually a 3D cube. Like I said, I just want to view it in 2D mode temporarily though. Now, with the cube selected, take a look at the Inspector tab. The Inspector shows different features or properties of the game object that we have selected. So if I switch over to the camera, you'll see that there are some camera-specific things showing in here. These are actually different components on the game object. And if I go back to the cube, we have some cube-specific stuff. We've got a box collider. This is for handling collisions. We have a renderer. This is so that it shows up. Right now, it's not rendering very beautiful. No, it's just plain white cube, but that's adjustable. And then we have the mesh filter, which is essentially just the mesh of the cube. We also have this transform component. Every object in Unity is going to have a transform. It determines where the thing is, where it's facing, and what size it is. So right here you'll see the position is 3 point something, negative 0.4, and a really small number there. I'm just going to reset all of these to 0 to just center the object. Now another way I could have done that, I'm going to undo real quick with Control Z. I could also right click on the transform component and just hit reset. That's just going to set them all to 0. I did have to click out of that for it to show up though. Now another way I can move this thing around is to switch to the move tool. So right here is the move tool. I can also hit W while I'm over the scene view. There we go, W over the scene view to select that tool. And this just allows me to grab the object and move it around. If I grab the box, I can just move it around up or down, left or right, or I can grab one of the arrows and just drag it along that axis. Again, I'm just going to reset it. And then I want to show you the game view. The game view shows what your player is going to see. Remember, in the scene view, we've switched over to a 2D camera, or a 2D view, so it looks kind of flat. In here, you can see a little tiny bit of perspective there. If we go back to the scene view, again, and switch to 3D mode, remember, it is a cube. Now, if I hit play, what will normally happen is the game view will take priority, and we'll see it, and not much else is going to go on because we don't really have any objects that are moving or any input handling or anything else going on. We're just rendering a cube. So the next thing I want to do is add in a sphere. So we're just going to go to game object, and we're going to go to 3D object and create a sphere. And if you look here, I can't move this thing around. If I try to drag it or anything, it's stuck. There's no way to move it. It's because I'm in the game view. So I want to switch back over to the scene view. Now, one thing I like to do personally is take my game view and pop it off and sometimes just drag it away to another monitor. I'm going to leave it on here for now just so that it's easy for you to see. Can't see my other monitors. But we can also pull them side by side If that's something that you prefer, you can really rearrange these however you like. I'm going to go back to the default view though while we finish this up. So I've got the sphere here, and remember I'm going to switch over to the scene view, and then I'm going to go back to 2D mode again, just because, like I said, it makes it a little bit easier for what I want to do. I want to place this thing directly over the other object. So first I'll right click on the transform of the sphere and reset it. Then I'll hit W to switch to move mode, and I'm just going to drag it up here. Now if I go to the game view, see it, I've actually dragged it so far off that I can't see it. Now let me pull the game view and the scene view side by side, and you'll see that if I pull it down to right about here, I can kind of see it in here. Now it's also going to vary a lot based on the aspect ratio of your game view. Right now I'm set to free aspect, so it's going to adjust to whatever size this window is. If I want to play my game in like a 1920 by 1080, I want to make sure that I select that resolution. Okay, so I've got a sphere there, I've got a cube, and if I hit play, again, nothing's going to happen. But I can just select my sphere and add a new component to it with this add component button. Remember, the sphere has to be selected. We go over to the inspector tab, hit add component, and we'll just add a rigid body. So I just start typing RIG and it filters down. When you're looking in here though, there are a lot of options. There's a whole lot that you can add. So just remember when you're thinking about coding things that there may already be a component that handles what you want to do. So I'm going to go down to physics again and look through all these options, and we'll pick the rigid body. I don't want to pick rigid body 2D, by the way. We're actually working with 3D objects. We're just using the scene view in the 2D view temporarily while we place things. We're not actually building a 2D game. So I've got the rigid body added. Now if I hit play, here, let's switch out of the 2D view for that one. Let's hit play and watch what happens. Sphere falls down, lands on the cube. We're good. So now we've got some physics happening. This object's falling, it's landing automatically. We still haven't needed to write a bit of code. Next thing I want to do is add a little code to our cube. So we're going to create a very simple C# script, and that's going to be added on as a component to our game object. So it'll be right here in the inspector. Now there are a couple ways that I can do this. I can go down into the project view, right click and hit create and choose C# script. And that's the way that I'll do it this time. Another way though that we could add it is going to the sphere and hit add component. And then right down here, there's a new script option, and we could give it the name of the script, and it'll create that. Actually, let's do it this way, and then we'll just move it into the correct folder. So I'm going to name this, let's call it, oh, I'm on the wrong object. I'm on the sphere. I want to be on the cube. So I'm going to go to the cube, scroll down, hit new script, and I'm going to name this cube mover. I want a capital C and a capital M so that I match the C# coding standards for a class. Technically, it'll work without that, but it's good to keep it nice and clean. Now, I'm in the assets folder, and you see we have the scene subfolder and the cube mover script. I want to create a new folder here and just name it scripts. This doesn't technically matter. It's just good to keep things clean and keep it organized. And a scripts folder is really common in a Unity project, so just expect to see that there. Some people name them different things like code or source or other things like that, but scripts is still the one that you'll see most often. So we'll go in here, and I've got the cube mover script on it, or in this folder, and I could double click it to open it in my editor. I can also go over here though and just double click on the script in this component to open it in my editor. So I'm going to do that now. Just double click, Visual Studio will open up on Windows. On a Mac, it's going to be whatever code editor you have set up. It could be MonoDevelop or Writer or something else. All right, the script has opened up. I'll just zoom this in, make it a little bit bigger. And there are a couple things to notice here. The first is that we have a new class named Cube Mover, which matches the name of the file that we put in. It's exactly what we want to have. And then there's this colon and the monobehaviour. If you've never used inheritance in C#, what that means is essentially that this Cube Mover, it's not just an empty object with nothing on it that doesn't do anything. It actually inherits from this monobehaviour class that adds in a lot of built-in functionality for us, so that we can just write the code that we really need. So I'm going to clean this up in the formatting. Right now it kind of defaults to a more JavaScripty format, and I want to change that. So what I like to do is hold Control, hit K, hold Control still, and hit D to just clean that up. You don't have to, but if you like your code to look like C# standard, it's an easy thing to do. Okay, so I don't need this whole start method. You'll see here that it says use this for initialization. So if I needed to initialize something on this thing, I could put the code right in there. Maybe I want to change the color of the thing. This would be a bad place to do it, but maybe I want to cache some other thing or set a health or something like that. I could do it in here. I'm going to delete that though. So just select it all and hit delete. Oops, accidentally added a slash. We'll get rid of that too. And the other thing that we have that's automatically added is an update method. And it says update is called once per frame. This is a side effect of the mono behavior. Actually, I guess it's a direct effect of the mono behavior. Having this update method implemented will make it automatically get called. Now you can't find the code that's calling it. It's kind of happening underneath in the engine, but this is going to get called once per frame on every object that has this cube mover script. So if we're running 100 frames a second, this will call 100 times a second. If we run at 1 frame a second, this will call 1 time a second. Now I'm going to get rid of, well, actually let's leave the comment there. And I'm going to add in some code to read input. So what I want to do is create a float. So I'll say float, not flat, float, horizontal. So this is going to be my horizontal axis, equals input dot get axis. And then I give it the exact same name, but with a capital H, horizontal. There we go. So now I've got a variable that tells me my horizontal value. So if I'm holding down, oh, here we go, an Xbox controller, for instance, if I push to the left, the value of this float is going to be -1. If I push to the right, it's going to be 1. And if I leave it right in the middle, it's going to be 0. So that's what we're reading here. We're just getting a number between -1 and +1. Now I'm going to copy this and paste it, and then change this to vertical. Copy, paste, go back and hit a capital V. So now I have the horizontal and vertical values. And I want to turn these into a vector 3. A vector 3 is just a structure with an X, a Y, and a Z value that we use for positions or directions. So we'll say vector 3, and I'm going to call this movement equals new, and it's going to be new vector 3, and I'll give it a, here, let's go, if I hit the down arrow, you can see the different constructors that we have available. We're actually just going to use this one right here. We just want to do the X and the Y. We want it moving left and right, up and down, but we don't want to use Z because then it would be moving in and out. And that's just not what we're building right now. So I'm going to say horizontal for the X and vertical for the Y. Put a semicolon there to end it off. Now I have a vector 3 that tells, or that has the direction that I'm pushing, basically. So if I'm pushing up and left, it's going to be -1, -1. If I'm pushing down right, it's going to be +1, +1, and so on. Now to move the object, all I need to do is say transform. This is actually a property of this object. It's another thing that's a part of the mono behavior. And this is going to reference, here, let's go back into the editor. It's going to reference this transform component right here. Let's jump back over to code. So we say transform.position. And if you look at position, it's a vector 3. So we're just going to add this movement vector to it. So we'll say plus equals movement. Now this will work, but if you remember what I said earlier, this update is called once per frame. So the frame rate is going to be a big factor here. So if we move, if this calls 1 time a second, it's going to move 1 meter, every second. If this is called 100 times a second, though, it's going to move 100 meters a second. And we want to get rid of that frame rate based movement. We want it to be frame rate independent. So instead of just adding movement, we're going to multiply movement times a variable called time. This is a static method, or static variable, dot delta time. So now we're just multiplying the movement by the amount of time since the last update was called. This makes it nice and smooth so that it's totally frame rate independent. Now I'm going to save my project, go back in, or I need to save my code. So Control S or F6 is another good default in Visual Studio to make sure it's saved. Let's just go back. Make sure that there's no star there. So there, see how there's a star? It means it's not saved. And I hit Control S and save it, and now the star is gone. Okay, the same thing here with the scene. Here, let's save the scene, why not? Doesn't matter when you're playing in here, but it's good so that if something goes wrong and it breaks, you can get back to what you had. So there the ball fell, and I have this cube mover script. Now I'm gonna just press left. Look at that. Oh, the cube moves left. If I press right, it moves right. If I press up, it goes up, or up and left, it goes up and left, and so on. So the cube moves around as I press a different direction. Now let me show you where these axes are coming from. So if we go to Edit, Project Settings, and Input, you see this little menu right here. We've got to expand it out. And here you see we have a horizontal, a vertical, fires, mouse ones, another horizontal, another vertical. These are all the different axes that we can read from input.getAxis. So we've got horizontal right here, and it's bound to a left arrow for the negative value and right arrow for the positive, and then it has alternates of A and D for left and right too. So you use left arrow, right arrow, or whatever. And then vertical is the same, up, down, S and W. And then these other ones, if we look down here, these are actually bound to joysticks. So instead of being set to a type of key or mouse, they're set to joystick axis. This is so that we can read a joystick like an Xbox controller nice and easily. All right, so I'm going to stop playing, and I'm going to make it so we can move our cube a little bit faster. So to do that, we're going to add a field up here on line 7. I'm going to say private float speed, and I'll set a default value of 1. But then I need to add a field or an attribute here with square brackets and do serialize field right there. So make sure it's not serializable, it's serialized field. What that's going to do is make this show up in the inspector. Now I'm going to take this speed variable and I'm just going to add that here with another multiplication. So multiply by movement and delta time and speed. So then we can speed up our player or our cube just by modifying something in the inspector. So we'll save that, come back over to the editor, and it's going to compile. You'll see this little spinny thing going for just a moment while it compiles. And then reselect the cube, and now we have a speed variable. So in here I can just crank this speed up, and I can do this at runtime. That's one of the really nice things about it. I don't have to recompile to change the speed. I can just go in and change it at any time. So here I'm moving at a 5. There we go. And I could turn this up to 20. And now I'm flying around really fast. So this is another just important thing to remember. If you want your fields to show up in here, you can make them public, but ideally if they don't need to be accessed outside of the class, so if nothing other than cube mover needs to read the speed, keep them private and add the serialized field attribute just to keep them from being misused. Okay, so now I want to make it so that my player dies when this ball hits him. In fact, let's go select the sphere and just name it bomb. And then let's make it so the bomb hits the player, which is the cube, and they die and lose the game. So for that to happen, we're just going to go back into our cube mover script. We're going to keep this nice and simple, just all in one little script. And we need to add a new method here. So say private void. And by the way, the private keyword is kind of optional. It doesn't really make a difference here. And we'll use on collision enter right there. So I just typed on COL enter. Now if it doesn't autocomplete for you, it's fine, but you are going to have to type out the full thing on collision enter, give it the type of collision with the lowercase collision. You need to make sure that casing and spelling is exact there, or you're going to run into problems and it's just not going to work. So on collision enter is a method that gets called whenever something with a rigid body hits the object that this is on. Now this object has to have a collider, but it does. Here, let's take another quick look. Remember, our cube has a box collider on it. So whenever something hits this box collider, on collision enter on our cube mover will get called. Now, if we get hit by anything at all, we don't care what it is in this case. We just want to reload the game. So to do that, I can just call scene manager. And as I type it, you see it's not auto-completing. I need to hit control period and add a using statement for Unity engine.scene management. Let's see that now that I've done that, which you can see right up here, just added right there. I'll say scene manager dot load scene, and I just give it a value of 0. That's just going to reload the first scene in our project. This is a really simple, really quick way to just reload and restart the game. Not so much in a big project, but in a nice simple thing like this, it'll work. Also, if we cared what we hit, we can look at that data on this collision object. This collision, if we look at this collision dot collider, this is actually the collider of the thing that hit, and then we can look at the other components on that collider with something like get component and get a different component and figure out if we hit a specific thing. Now in this case, again, we don't care if we hit anything, we're counting that as a death. So now, let's go back into our project. I'll save my scene one more time, and I'll hit play and watch what happens when the cube gets hit by the ball. Bam! It reloaded, and you can tell it reloaded because the lighting got a little bit messed up. We'll fix that in just a second. But you can see it's just reloading and restarting. But if I dodge it, it drops right down. So here, let's fix that lighting issue real quick. To do that, you just need to go to Window, and then Lighting and Settings. Oh, and mine is actually off screen, so just drop it right over here. And then just go uncheck the auto generate in the debug settings and then click the generate lighting button. And it should only take a couple seconds. It's actually going a little bit slower than I'd expected. There we go, all done. So now when I hit play, oh, I probably should have saved my scene. But yeah, there we go. Now the lighting is no longer breaking. All right, so the last thing I want to do is, well, I guess there are two things I want to do still. I want to make this bomb reset if it misses me. So let's move the bomb over here. I'm going to switch back to 2D mode for just a second. Hit W. I'll move it over here so it's going to miss me for sure. And then I want to add in a new script on the bomb. So I'm on the bomb, and I need to select that inspector tab again. Remember, I just docked a lighting tab over there. And we're going to add another script. Now this time I'm just going to add it in the scripts folder. So right click in the scripts folder, hit new, create new C# script, and we'll call this bomb. And then we're going to get rid of start again and clean it up with Control K, Control D. Get rid of all that extra space. And then in here, I'm just going to check if, and we're going to look at the transform.position.y value. So this is the y value of that transform component on there. If it's less than -10, I want to respawn. So just say the word respawn, open close parentheses and a semicolon, and then I hit control period to just generate a respawn method. Now the respawn method is just going to be responsible for setting the y position back up to the top for now. So say transform.position equals new vector3, and then we need to give it an x value. So we'll give it, well, let's give it a 0 for now. And then a y value, we'll give it a -10, and then a semicolon. So this is going to reset it right back to the middle though. So the x value is going to be 0, the y value will be -10. So here we go, let's press play. It should fall down past me. Oh, watch, it's going to fall down past me, and it's never going to reset. The reason for that, if we select the bomb, I created the component, I did not add it to the object. So I need to have the bomb selected, then I can just drag the script right onto there. I could also just add a component and type in bomb and add it that way, but it's another easy way to do it. Just drop the component right on there for the script. Now if the script is not a monobehaviour, you won't be able to drop it on there, so if you run into that, just remember to watch out for that. Here, let's save the scene again. Let's let the ball fall again, or the bomb, I guess. And eventually, oh, there we go. It reset, but it went down to -10. I put a negative there. That should be a +10. Let's try it one more time. So now it should fall down and then reset right back up to there and kill me. Okay, cool. Now if I move out of the way, look at what's happening. It's getting faster and faster and faster every time it resets. So we need to change the velocity of that object. If we look at the bomb, remember it has a rigid body. Rigid bodies have a velocity value on them that just say how fast the thing is going. And we can read that or set that value. So we're just going to go down into our respawn, and we need to get a reference to our rigid body. So to do that, I'm going to say var rigid body equals get component rigid body. Make sure that you get the regular rigid body, not the 2D one, by the way. And then we'll say rigid body dot velocity equals vector3.0, capital or lowercase zero, and then that will reset the velocity back down to 0. So now if I hit play, move out of the way, the ball's going to reset, it's going to fall, but it's not going to keep getting faster and faster. It's going to keep restarting at a slow speed and then slowly speeding up. Cool, we're almost done. I want to change this up just a little bit more though, and make it so that our bomb respawns in a randomized position. So it's not always at 0, maybe not always at 10 either. So to do that, I need to get a random float value. So I'll say float random x equals, and then I say Unity engine dot random dot range. And then we need to give it a minimum value. So I'll say -10, and a max value, I'll give it a +10. Then I'll just put the random x in place of that 0, and then let's add another one for a random y. So I'll copy that, random y, and these values I want to all be 10 or greater, so I think I'll say 10 to 20. And I'll copy that here and paste it in. Now what I can do that'll be pretty interesting, I think, is make it so that when this object starts the first time, it automatically picks a random position, so it's never in the same position. So to do that, we can add another method up here. Let's say on enable right there. See, if I just start typing, it's going to autocomplete. Now hit enter, you'll see we get private void on enable. And here I'll just call respawn. So this happens whenever the object gets turned on or checked on. Now if we go into the editor, this checkbox right here, this is enabling and disabling the object. Now we're not going to get the on enable when we're not in play mode, so don't worry about that. But once here, let me disable the object. I'll hit play, and then when I enable it, that's going to get called. It's going to get a random position and fall down. And then when it respawns, there we go, it's getting another random position and falling down. So not much of a challenge right now, so let's just increase the difficulty a little bit by selecting the bomb here. Let's activate it, check that box that it's on, and then I can just hold down Control or Command on a Mac and hit D a couple times. And now we've got 10 bombs. Save my scene, hit play, and we can move around and dodge all these bombs that are falling down. Here, let's stop playing real quick, grab the cube, and just slide them down to the bottom of the screen so we have a little bit more room to dodge. There you go. Save that off, hit play one more time. And now I should be able to dodge them. I'm kind of cheating by looking at the scene view and knowing what's coming. Oh, and I think I've got my speed turned down way too low. Here, let's check that out. Let's look at the cube again. Speed, yeah, I think I'll crank that up to a 10. Anyway, hopefully this has helped a little bit and you're kind of starting to understand the different areas of the editor. Remember, the hierarchy here is more of a list view of everything that's in your scene. We have all of these bombs here. You're not really seeing them in the scene view. That's just because they're stacked on top of each other. If I grab them and just move them around randomly, you'll be able to see them all. And you see that they highlight in here when they're selected in there. And remember, the position of these at this point doesn't matter because we're just randomizing them at start anyway. But you can still move them around. And if you want to remove the randomization part on start, you can just undo that on enable part. Again, the project view down here, it's more like your folder. It actually maps directly to a folder. So if I right click and hit show in Explorer, here we go, and pull the window over, you'll see it's just a one-for-one mapping of the thing. There are these meta files that just store a little info about the imported asset, maybe like texture resolution style stuff, IDs for things so that the objects can link up easily, but you don't really have to worry about those, just leave them there. And let's see, other than that, there was the inspector tab, so you select an object, go to the inspector, and then the lighting tab. We're not really talking too much about that, but those just to get rid of the bugged out lighting stuff that happens there. Anyway, I hope this is a little bit helpful as a quick introduction. I'll probably do some more of these, just following along this later. If you have any questions, feel free to just drop a comment below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that kind of fun stuff, and keep coding.